friends, welcome to my very first YouTube video. Thank you so much for being here if you're watching this right now. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Kiani. I do have a small bookish space carved out for myself over on Instagram. My handle is @romanticyandmatcha. I love it over there, so if you are watching this video because you came from my bookstagram, thank you so much for being here. I figured what better way to start my little YouTube journey than to start it off with a get to know me bookish edition. So I'm going to just answer a few questions and kind of give you some of my bookish pros, cons, icks, whatever you want to call them. But yeah, I hope that you stick around and you keep watching. So I just Googled Get to Know Me Bookish Edition and stumbled across ZZ with Books, and they have a 20 questions tag bookish edition. So this can be found at zzwithbooks.wordpress.com. I will leave it linked in the description down below if you want to answer these questions as well. But with that being said, let's just get into the questions. So the first question is, how many books is too many books in a series? Honestly, it really depends. For fantasy books, I really don't like to do more than 5, but really my favorite kind of fantasy series are duologies and trilogies because they're quick, they're easy, you can get them done and move on to the next story. But for a romance book, if it's an interconnected, like standalone series, I really don't care how many books there are. But typically, I don't usually go past series that are like anywhere from 3 to 4 books for romance. Ooh, the next question is a good one. It's, how do you feel about cliffhangers? In books, I haven't had too much experience with cliffhangers because I only recently started picking back up the hobby of reading like 2 years ago. So most of the series that I have read have just been completed series. But for the few cliffhangers I have read, for example, The Sunbearer Trials was a cliffhanger to me. That one I was like, no, Aiden, I need you to drop the book right now because I need to know what happens. But honestly, the wait was well worth it for that one. So usually if I do find a cliffhanger of a book that I enjoyed, I do find that the wait is worth it regardless of how much I hate waiting for it. Hardback or paperback? I'm going to say 50-50 on this one. Let me explain myself. I would say 50% hardback because I have a lot of special edition sprayed edge copies, and I just find that hardback special edition books tend to last a bit longer, so I do prefer those in hardback. But for everyday reading where I'm annotating or I'm breaking the spine of a book by accident, I am not a spine breaker, but sometimes it does happen. I prefer paperback for that. Favorite book? Honestly, I have too many, but the one that really stands out to me is not a book, it's actually a series, and that's going to be Percy Jackson and the Olympians. I love this series because it holds such a special place in my heart, and that is because when I first expressed any interest in reading, my grandfather was like super excited, and he did his research on what books would be best for young adults, and Percy Jackson and the Olympians happened to come up at that time. And so he went out to Costco and bought me the entire paperback box set of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, and I read the entire series in like a week and was obsessed with it. And because my grandfather is no longer here, that series just holds a special place in my heart. And I always kind of find myself thinking about Percy Jackson and his adventures and just thinking about how I wouldn't even have the opportunity to do half of the things I do in the adventures that I go on in my own life without my grandfather. So, Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Least favorite book. Now, I already know that some of my friends are watching this video right now and they're thinking like, I already know what her least favorite book is because she talks about it every holiday season. Because I just really don't like that book that much. And, well, I hate that book that much, I mean. And that's going to be A Merry Little Meet Cute. And again, this is not to like talk trash on anybody's like writing or the authors or anything like that. There's just one specific scene in this book that was just too much for me, and it made me close the book and not even finish the book. If you know, you know. But I don't want to put out any spoilers for those people that haven't read it. But I absolutely hate that book, and I hate that book so much that I've never read a holiday book since. I will be changing that this year. I do need to read more holiday books because there are plenty of authors out there that have amazing holiday books, and I want to make sure that I'm reading them. So I will be reading a few holiday books this year, hopefully. Oh, here's a good one. Love triangles, yes or no? I'm going to go with yes. I love the dramatic aspect of a love triangle. I just think that it like has me kicking my feet and like the biggest grin on my face usually when I'm reading books about love triangles. The only thing that I have a tiff with about love triangles is that usually the person that I want to end up with the main character doesn't, so then I get a little bit irritated. when I have to read like epilogues and it's not the person that I want them to be with. But yeah, I love a good love triangle. Ooh, this one, I don't know. The most recent book you just couldn't finish. So I haven't DNF'd a book in a while. I am very, very bad at DNFing a book. But the last book that I can remember that I DNF'd was actually a book that was bought for me as a joke. One of my friends gifted me a copy of a book called Unwrap My Heart after seeing a TikTok of some random dude, I think, on TikTok saying that he has read a ton of monster romances but never read any about mummies. So he took it upon himself to write a mummy book. I'm sure the plot was great. But it was just that the writing style was a little bit too choppy for me for it to like maintain my interest, so I stopped reading it. I do want to pick it back up just to say that, oh, I have read a mummy romance in my life. But I don't know. I might need to be like intoxicated or something. The next question is, what are you currently reading? And I am currently reading The Secret World of Maggie Gray, the Drew Collins book #1. And the description says, a vampire, a witch, and a siren get accepted into a magical HBCU. The rest I'm not allowed to say, but just know that there's a talking cat named Quan, a few murders that went cold, and a world that is just below our feet. I started reading this one earlier this week, and there's the very first chapter of this book tells you the backstory as to why the world that's under these people's feet exists. And that's all it took for me to be like, okay, I know this story is about to be good as fuck. I need to continue reading this. So I'm excited to kind of dive into this book and really see what the world is about that they're trying to create. But it's really, really interesting so far. So if you like fantasy and kind of just like secrets, it kind of seems like this book follows along that. So you should definitely check this one out. Okay, the last book you recommended to someone. Again, not a singular book, but a series. I am constantly recommending 2 series, and that's going to be the Skyland series by Kennedy Ryan. This follows a group of 3 friends and their individual stories on either finding their way back to love or finding their way to love. Kennedy Ryan is such a beautiful writer, and she has emotionally provoking stories. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, that's a good one. And then the other one that's just kind of like a fun short read romance series is going to be the Rebel Blue Ranch series by Lila Sage. I love everything about Rebel Blue, Meadowlark, Wyoming, the Ryder siblings, but honestly, just everything about those books is chef's kiss, and I could not recommend them more. Okay, this one's a good one. Oldest book you've read by publication date. I'm pretty sure the oldest book I've read, just off the top of my head, because I'm literally not going to go back into my story graph and try to find what the oldest book I've read by publication date is probably the Iliad and the Odyssey. I read that back in high school, and that was like the catalyst to me falling in love with Greek mythology. But I'm also obsessed with, what is it called? Epic the Musical, the soundtrack, which I think is based off of the Odyssey. Don't quote me on that. But Epic is amazing. So if you're not listening to Epic the Musical, you definitely should listen to it, especially if you love Greek mythology and musical theater. But yeah, the Iliad and the Odyssey. Newest book you've read by publication date. That's going to be some of the arcs that I'm reading right now, which I'm currently reading Diffused by Bridget L. Rose and a few others. I'm not sure of their names, but books that have already currently been published is going to be Lost and Lassoed by Lila Sage. Favorite author. Okay, I have a lot of favorite authors, but if I had to give it to one person, I'm going to have to give Kennedy Ryan her flowers. And the reason why I have to give Kennedy Ryan her flowers is not only is she funny, the worlds she creates are beautiful, but just again, the emotions that she provokes in her stories and some of the hard-hitting topics that she approaches with such a gentleness, but she doesn't let the gentleness affect the realness of some of the harder topics that she approaches. So, for example, in Before I Let Go, the main characters are a husband and wife who are separated, but they have 2 kids, and they were supposed to have a 3rd kid, but they unfortunately lost their child, and so they separated, but they have to own a business together. That, all on its own, sounds like a lot of shit to go through. But on top of that, you have the female main character, Yasmin, dealing with depression, and Josiah, who's the male main character, having some sort of aversion to therapy. and wanting to do therapy because he just thinks it's kind of like not real and it doesn't really help anybody, until his son has to go through needing therapy. And then he realizes, you know, maybe therapy does have some kind of good attached to it. But she's just very straightforward with how she approaches things, but also approaches them very gently. And I haven't been able to find that with other books that approach some really, really heavy topics. It's kind of like, yes, some authors approach it with gentleness, but just in my opinion, from what I've seen thus far, nobody does it like Kennedy Ryan. Buying books or borrowing books? If you would have asked me 6 months ago, I would have said buying books. But honestly, thank you, Devin, if you're watching this, thank you for introducing me to Libby. I'm now a book borrower. I just think that supporting your local library is the best thing that we can do right now because libraries are already few and far between. And we need to be supporting, you know, history and the books that we already have. And two, it's free. Like in this economy, I want all the free shit I can get. So I'm going to go with borrowing books. But if it's a book that I really, really love and I just want a shelf trophy, I'm going to go out and buy it. Like the last book I bought was Lost and Lassoed, and I can't remember the book I bought before that. This question might cause some controversy. A book that you dislike that everyone else seems to love. From the books that I have read, I'm going to go Love Light Farms. Again, this might be a little bit biased because A Merry Little Meet Cute really messed up holiday books for me, but I tried reading Love Light Farms last Christmas and it was not... Everybody and their mom was telling me it was amazing. I don't think it was a bad book by any means. I just don't think that it was enough for me to be like, oh my god, I love Christmas books. So I'm going to say Love Light Farms. Bookmarks or dog ears? Don't piss me off. I 100% always use a bookmark. I just view like dog earing a page as if like somebody was like, broke my arm, you know? I wouldn't want anybody doing that. I'm not going to do that to a book. Ooh, a book you can always reread. I'm going to say that a book that I always lean towards rereading is going to be The Summer I Turned Pretty. I first watched the show before I ever read the book, but once I read the book, I was hooked. And it's just kind of like a comfort read for me. I love reading it at the beach in the summertime. So I'm going to say The Summer I Turned Pretty. Can you read while hearing music? No, I can't. But what I can do is I can read while I'm listening to either ASMR or I'm listening to like a Pomodoro timer that has like nature sounds or something. One or multiple POVs. That really depends. If it's a book where romance is a subplot, one POV, sure. Fantasy books, I need everybody's POVs. It pisses me off when I don't get more than one person's POV because I think that if we're not reading from multiple point of views in fantasy books, we're getting a very skewed perspective about what's going on. So I really, really, really prefer multiple point of views. Do you read a book in one sitting or over multiple days? Depends on the length of the book. If it's under 200 pages, I can typically read it in a day, sometimes even 300. For example, the Rebel Blue Ranch series, they're all about 300 to 350 pages. I can read those in one sitting because they're just that good. If it's like a huge fantasy book, I try to spread it out over 7 days, or if it's like 800 pages, 2 weeks. A book you've read because of the cover. A book I've read because of the cover... I'm going to have to go with Caraval. Honestly, Caraval's cover is really, really pretty, especially the new holiday editions that just came out. And I didn't know anything about Caraval going into it. I really just was like, ooh, pretty cover, bought the book, read it, was obsessed with it. So I'm going to go with Caraval. And that was it for the questions, you guys. I hope you got to know a little bit more about me. You should comment down below and tell me what your favorite book is or what you're currently reading or who your favorite author is because I'd love to get to know more about you guys. But make sure you like, comment, and subscribe if you like this video. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Bye.
Got me upside down.